Welcome back to Juice's Arthropods, and this is my Memorial Day special top 10 questions I am most commonly asked. So, as part of my business, I am often get questions from people, which is it's awesome. I love. By the way, you guys can ask me anything you ever want to. I will nerd out about bugs with you all of the time. So please continue with the questions. So what I did is I took some of these questions that I get commonly asked the most. This is between the reptile expos and I had sent out a thing on Instagram the other day. So I appreciate you guys putting those in. But for the sake of time, because some of these are going to be a little bit longer than others, let's just get started into the top 10 questions that I am most commonly asked. Starting with number one, which is how do I get rid of fungus gnats? This is a challenge of having. Well, they said gnats specifically, so I want to preface this. There's two different categories that people are talking about commonly when they talk about gnats. One, they could be fruit flies, and then one could be fungus gnats. There's a solution to both, so I'm going to answer them very quickly. If you have a lot of fungus gnats, and you'll know because they're going to be real tiny, I'll actually show you some footage of what they look like. Then you can get rove beetles, and those will actually their entire form. They'll eat the fungus gnat larva, and they will take care of that problem very quickly. The fruit fly one is going to be a little bit more complicated, and the easiest way to deal with this is just do not put fruit in the enclosures. And then when it is a vegetable, make sure that you're only putting in the amount that you need for the animals themselves. Most common things that people will do that create this major problem is they will just put too much food in there and they forget that their arthropods are very tiny mouths. They can't consume a lot of food. So like for instance, like one disc this big of a butternut squash that I've chopped into discs, maybe 1 to 2 discs will feed an entire thing of isopods. Like you do not need to cube up an entire salad for them. So I would say with in short, to summarize, if you want to get rid of the actual fungus gnats, add rove beetles to your enclosure. They cannot harm the creatures themselves. They will only attack fungus gnats and a couple other things that are not going to matter to you. And then number two is reduce the amount of vegetables and food you're putting in there and avoid fruits at all costs. This is where those guys lose their mind. The way that the actual fruit flies get attracted is as the fruit begins to rot, it gives off CO2 and it will attract every fruit fly in the vicinity. So I hope that helps you. For number two, I get asked this quite a bit, which is, Juice, how in the world am I supposed to properly feed things that require eating fruit flies? Yeah, so that's a great question. It's because we always sell these 32-ounce fruit flies on our website, right? You'll see these probably the most common of anybody else. And there's a trick to how to do this. And the trick is very simple. You get a secondary container. So this is one of my breeder cups that I have for myself. This is actually, I'm testing a kombucha formula. As you can see, if you can see it, there's a lot of fruit flies in there. You need 2 containers. So container number one, there are tricks where you can put them in the fridge for a minute and they'll just slow down. Here's another trick. Tap them. Just tap them. And then as you tap them, you want to take some Vaseline, which I only use this Vaseline specifically for all of my creatures. You take a thin layer and you just wipe it along the inside of this cup. Now, I've already added a real thin layer on there. You do this for 2 reasons. One, as you'll see in a second, the fruit flies, if it's thin enough, they cannot climb up the side of the Vaseline. Number 2, if there's any eggs in it, what it will do is the eggs will actually get trapped. So you tap the top of it, you can keep tapping it, and if you notice, they can't climb out the top. And then you just tap them all in there, slam it back down, close up the top. And what you will notice is, I don't know if you can see it, the fruit flies cannot get past the Vaseline. They will stop right there, and all of your problems are solved. You don't need to worry about, like, I've seen videos where people are like opening up new ketchup bottles and stuff. You don't need to do that. Just do this. It's the easiest thing ever. And now you can tap out as many as you actually need, and then you can continue to feed your creatures for the infinite amount of time. I have like 1,000 things I have to feed with fruit flies. So if I was doing it the way that other people were telling me, it would take me months. So a friend of mine named Tara showed me this. It was awesome. So yeah, secondary cup, Vaseline, paper towel, wipe a thin layer. If you glob it, they're going to climb up the side. So you want to treat this stuff like thin ice around the outside of it, and they can't get past your little thing. And then on top of it, like I said, if you tap out some eggs, doesn't matter. It's going to get stuck to the Vaseline when you're tapping it. So there you go. Happy feeding. So for this next one, I've gotten multiple variations of this. And there's like three thoughts I have about what they're thinking when they say it, but I'm going to cover all three. The question was, do you ever have unholy thoughts about your bugs? I've also had people say, are you attracted to your bugs? No. And I'm really confused. Like there's three trains of thought. Either one, it's a joke and they think it's funny, and it's not. It's just lame. Like it's not even a good joke. Two is they think I'm genuinely attracted to my bugs because I breed them and I show videos of me breeding them. These are educational, guys. Like the bugs do the work. I'm not like setting the mood for them. They just do everything. And then third is they genuinely are curious if I'm into these things. Like if you're the kind of person that you can't be into a hobby unless you want to sleep with said hobby, then that says more about you than me. So I apologize. No, I'm not attracted to my bugs. They're a hobby, a business, and like bugs are awesome, but not in that way, you freaking weirdo. Number four, I get all of the time. I blame Peter from Bugs in Cyberspace because he very commonly will help people with this, and I will too. But I need to make this abundantly clear. When you ask me, what is this bug? I need a couple things from you. And I'm going to start with the least important to the most important. The least important is I need to know where you live and where you found it. If you were from Tennessee, but you've traveled to Florida and you've sent me the bug, do not tell me where you live. Tell me where you found it at. Number two, I need you to take a picture like you've taken a picture before. I don't know what it is, but when you guys send me pictures of bugs, it's like you closed your eyes and snapped the shot of it from a camera that was made in 1995. I cannot possibly understand what I'm looking at. When you're looking at it, ask yourselves a couple questions. Can I tell what I'm even looking at in this picture? Does it have coloration? Can I see the number of legs? Can I see any distinguishable marks? Treat this like somebody robbed a convenience store and you have to give like an actual description of the witness, because what you guys are doing is telling me that the person has legs and a head, and that's all the information you're giving me. So while I will always help you with this question, please, location of where you found the bug. Take a good picture. And what I mean by that is like, dude, zoom in. Do like, treat it artsy. Like, treat every bug picture you're going to send me like a picture of a meal you're about to eat. If you can do that, then I can help you with the bug. And one last thing, if you send me pictures of grubs or beetle larvae, I'm using both interchangeably because some people don't know that those are the same thing. Um, I cannot possibly tell. There is like most of the world is beetles. Most of the living creatures in the world are beetles. And every single one of those, I'm not an entomologist and I don't specialize in beetles more specifically. So it's very difficult. I can barely tell the difference between my beetle larvae by looking at them, except for certain species because they all kind of look alike. So sorry, guys, but I love these questions. Continue sending me pictures, but be like 25% better photographers is all I'm asking. Which isopod should I buy? Which one do you want to buy? When you ask me these questions, I need to know a couple things. What are you buying it for? If it's going to be bioactive, I'm going to always say powders. Like powder blues, powder orange for bioactive are amazing. You can also do any of the Porcellio scaber also work pretty well. But there's a couple different things I need to know when you're asking me which isopod should I buy. Are you buying them to look pretty, or are you buying them for purpose? Because it's going to have a very different, there's going to be very different answers to that. Now, there are some that are what you might consider pretty versus what I might consider pretty. So just keep in mind when you're asking me what kind of isopod, be prepared for the following things. Are you housing it with something else? Is it a bioactive? And how many of them do you want? Because if you are not doing bioactive with something that can eat them, something like a powder blue or a powder orange is going to very quickly become a problem that you're going to have to deal with. And oftentimes the problem you're going to have to deal with means you're going to have to kill some of them by freezing them. So, or you could just let that bin go completely overrun and then you're just going to let them die by starvation, which neither one is really better. So, yeah, so let me know when you're asking these questions, like what kind of isopods you can buy. My personal answer to all of these is powder blues for pretty much everything, just because like I like isopods, but like I can't think of a lot of scenarios where you're just putting them on a shelf to make them look pretty. If that is what you're looking for, then go pick the prettiest one. Every single one has the pros, every single one of them have the cons. And I'll actually soon be creating sheets that will have specific factors on what you're looking for, make it a little bit more like a Pokemon game, so you guys can see exactly what you're looking for. So, but in short, I would always say Gastroids is the answer to my question for all of them. For this next question, I love this question because the answer is always like a resounding maybe. I get asked, can I cohabitate millipedes with isopods? And the answer to this is sometimes. There are some species of isopods that are very aggressive with proteins. And if you're not providing them enough proteins, they will try to consume things. Now, the millipedes themselves are poisonous. So the isopods in general will leave them alone. However, sometimes in between molting, you'll get some of them that will die doing it, but they can potentially harm your millipede, and more importantly, they can stress your millipede out, which can also lead to death. Bigger, hardier species of millipedes, you're typically not going to have to worry about it. But there is one more thing you have to consider when you're thinking about isopod and millipede cohabitation, since they do eat the same foods, is that they will be competing for resources. That's not going to be that big of a deal if you're doing this to have like a beautiful terrarium that has some cool millipedes in it, has some cool isopods in it. But it can be a big deal at depending on the species of isopod because some isopods will grow completely uncontrollable. I had mentioned early in the video powder blues. I don't recommend doing powder blues or powder oranges with any millipede just because they will consume everything. Another thing is if you're hoping to breed your millipedes, they will also eat eggs. So like that's another thing you got to consider. So I would say if you were to have like a big old chonky type of like maybe like a gastroid or something like that that I've mentioned with like a giant African millipede, you just need to make sure ultimately that the millipede and the isopod can live in the same habitat and also that they don't breed uncontrollably. And if you're going to put them both into something that you're not putting the millipedes in an area with like say a reptile like a gecko that's going to attempt to eat the millipede because it can harm your reptile at the end of the day. So maybe resoundingly. Next question I get is Juice. I see that you have regular springtails or temperate springtails and orange springtails. One is more expensive than the other. Which one should I buy? Both, because I own the business. So, of course, I'm going to be biased to that. But I like to utilize both for a different reason. And that is the orange springtails, typically in a container. Let's say it's like this, like this is the top, this is the bottom. The orange springtails will not sit on top. They will go all the way down and they will get some of the deeper molds that you will have in your enclosure. This is really good because isopods do not eat the mold. That's the springtails that eat the mold. So they will take care of the mold at the bottom. Springtails typically will take on top. And then the orange springtails will come to the top to eat certain foods and then go back down for a little while. So it's really beneficial in a bioactive enclosure that you're essentially having both. Now, they will compete for resources. They will try to outbreed each other, but ultimately they seem to do pretty well. I've had them around about 6 months now where I've got them cohabitating in a bin, and I haven't seen any die-offs or any competition or anything like that because keep in mind in a bioactive, there is consistent food being brought back into it through, say, dung or what have you. So you're really not going to have a problem with that. But I honestly recommend both of them because it really helps with the mold when you have, especially if it's like a high humidity. There's nothing wrong with mold, but it can kind of grow uncontrollably in like the yellow mold formats where you get a lot of fungi and whatnot, or fungus or fungi, or however you want to say that word. So, in short, I would say the difference is that the orange springtails ultimately require a little bit more humidity. So, I wouldn't use them for any like arid environment where the white springtails will. The other benefit to the orange springtails is they don't jump, which is infuriating when you're trying to put them in a cup or anything like that. So, second to last question I receive all of the time is what is the best pet arthropod for kids? The answer to this is almost always a resounding Madagascar hissing cockroach because um, you people give your kids like cats and dogs and they live like 15 to 25 years, depending on which one you're talking about. And that's great. But ultimately, that's not their pet. That's your pet that you're going to be taking care of all of the time. So if you want a pet, this is a different question. But if you legitimately want a good starter pet that your kid really can't screw up, Madagascar hissing cockroach or any of the hissing species. The reason for this is that they only have to spray them with water every couple days. They don't have to worry about a water dish, really. They can just spray the cage. I mean, you can give them a water dish if you want to, but you really can't screw this up, is what I'm trying to tell you. You throw in whatever table scraps of vegetables that you're eating occasionally. Just try to keep it organic the best you can. If you're not bougie like that and you're on a budget, it's fine. They'll be fine most of the time. Just rinse the scraps, send them off in there. You can give them some proteins. You can buy dog biscuits for like $1.50 and just toss them some dog biscuits occasionally. Or you can do what I do, and I buy koi pellets because I have a bunch of different things that eat proteins, and they're very high in protein. So I just toss some koi pellets in there, and they eat them. They're a very, 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 very easy pet, and they have one additional thing. If your kid tries to pick them up and is handling them too rough, the hissing cockroach will shout at them. Like it will hiss very loud at them, which tells your kid it's the same thing as like with cats and dogs. Your child will know not to continue doing what it's doing. Where other invertebrates, they don't have that defense mechanism. Oftentimes in like say a tarantula, you're either your kid's going to get a whole face full of hair or bitten. And with millipedes, you run the risk of there being a lot of poison, and kids are notoriously bad at washing their hands after they touch things. I mean, if COVID taught us anything, it's that most people are bad at touching things and washing their hands. So I would say that ultimately the hissing cockroach is going to be the best. I would pick a male though, specifically because you never know when you order them if they've been paired together. They always are. They're always together. No one, not a single person is individually housing these things. So just buy an adult male. This thing will live 2 to 3 years. Your kid will get a really good understanding of how to take care of an invertebrate and then go from that point on. If you're squeamish about roaches, that's not my problem. That's your kid wants this. So either you adjust or get them a different pet. But you asked me what the best one is, which is Madagascar hissing cockroach. One last thing is, if you are afraid of roaches, this is the perfect pet that will get you past it because they are large enough and they do not look like a normal house roach because they do not have wings, which is what most people are freaking out about is the general roachy look. So hope that helps. And finally, the last question that I am asked consistently is, can I cohabitate isopods with tarantulas? What you can and what you should do are very different here. I'm on the fence and saying no. And the why for this is twofold. One, isopods can eat pinky mice in like 6 hours. Like isopods are omnivorous, guys. Like there are some that will take proteins differently. There are some that will be aggressive with proteins. And in a normal scenario, your tarantula is going to be really good. I mean, when they're molting specifically, they're going to put the little bed down of hair, hairs and web and everything else. The problem is that isopods will just come from underground and up. And so while your tarantula is molting, they can eat your tarantula, which is not good because the tarantula, while its exoskeleton hasn't hardened yet, is very, very weak. And it also, the other part to this is isopods and anything being near them can stress them out and they can die during molt. It's just like the most stressful thing. Imagine if every time, like your skin cells shed constantly. Imagine instead if like once every 2 years, you had to peel out of all of your skin and bones. And then you had to just sit in like a jello mold while you like got like dry, essentially. It's not great. So very stressful for them. So isopods are just not great. They're not good. They're going to stress them out. They're going to stress them out pretty much constantly. And they're going to potentially harm your tarantula. So in my personal recommendation, it would be no. Unless it is a terrestrial tarantula, it's a little bit easier for them. Or if it's an arboreal tarantula. So I would say if you have an arboreal tarantula and you got lots of places for them to hide, then maybe. But ultimately, just put springtails in there, guys. They're going to do all of the things that the isopods are going to do. Maybe not to the same level, but they're going to eat the feces. They're going to take care of the mold. The isopods and bioactive are just there to eat the proteins and the feces alone. And tarantulas don't have enough feces, except for my avicularia, to even really have to worry about it. So I would just say, get some springtails, get some orange, get some whites, and then just put it in some tarantulas in there. those won't bother the tarantula at all because their web mat will completely take care of the springtail issues. So that would be my personal recommendation. There are other people who are going to disagree with me. That's fine. I'm just telling you what I recommend. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoy these very quick, hopefully very quick video, and we will see you soon.